Hello, and thank you for taking the time to evaluate your poster. My name is Muhammed Shariff, and I'm a senior majoring in biomedical engineering, and I'm joined alongside Abbas Seki, Bidyut Mani, and Jacob Alkel, along with our PI, Dr. Karanjit Kuner, to present to you our graphene-based contact lens sensor for semi-continuous intraocular pressure monitoring. But before we really begin, we need to discuss our reasons or motivations for why we're really going into this field specifically. As Dr. Kuhner is a PI and an ophthalmologist, he has seen many patients suffer from glaucoma. But what is glaucoma? Glaucoma is one of the leading causes of irreversible blindness around the world. Currently, we are seeing over 2.5 million individuals in the United States alone who are suffering from glaucoma, and it's expected to increase to about 6.5 million by the year 2050. Nevertheless, the reasons for the underlying etiology is not really fully understood. Factors such as intraocular pressure or IOP, old age, and pathological conditions such as hypertension and diabetes may be some factors. In addition, IOP seems to really be increasing during the nighttime. Various attempts to really monitor IOP over extended intervals have been really undertaken over this past decade. Many of them, unfortunately, are surgical in nature and are not really appealing to many patients, considering the fact that they don't really want to get a surgery when they're trying to just evaluate IOP. Nevertheless, in 2015, Sensimed, a group in Switzerland, came out with their triggerfish, which was revolutionary at the time. Unfortunately, despite its revolutionary potential, it failed for many reasons, specifically because of the fact that there was not really a way to relate voltage to pressure, which is really necessary for clinicians. In addition, the lack of accessibility to this high price, most patients could not really afford it. So we propose a graphene-based, battery-free, smart contact lens capable of measuring regional variations in IOP over a 72-hour window. We're going to be taking over 2 measurements every hour, and all the while we're still going to be ensuring high sensitivity, affordability, that's the most important part, and patient comfort. So what is the clinical significance to begin with? Temporal fluctuations are seen, actually, in a study done in 2004 by Mosaid. Over most of the individuals you can see right here in this figure 1, most, if not all, the individuals experience a significant increase in IOP within the time range of 9:30 p.m. to 7:30 a.m. This is a real problem because most patients come into clinic after 9:30 to really get a reading. And considering that most of it is actually increasing overnight, a lot of false negatives are actually going to be given out, and that's a problem. In addition, something really interesting happens. We noticed that from readings in that every 1 millimeter mercury change in the IOP actually corresponds to about 3 microns changes in the actual arc curvature of our cornea. Now this is perfect because our cornea also has a natural tear film, which allows for perfect conformation of our contact lens onto our cornea. Considering that IOP pretty much expands for 1 millimeter mercury, 3 microns, we can correlate deformations in the cornea to actually changes in IOP, and that makes contact lenses a really viable option for us. But before we really talk about the electrical mechanism, let's talk about some material design specifications. So for a contact lens, the most important aspect is actually going to be oxygen transmissibility. Those corneal epithelial cells right behind the contact lens need to be infused with oxygen, and unfortunately, without that, it leads to a hypoxic state. So the real factor we need to look at is dK over T, which is our index for how much oxygen is being transmitted. In addition, we also looked into potential ways to have patient comfort. We thought originally that perhaps water would have been really high importance because water percentage would have been, ideally to have a high level of comfort. Nevertheless, by a study done by Chung et al. In 2019 has actually proved this wrong. In fact, the only and most important factor is just dK over T. So based on our evaluations of multiple types of materials out there, we personally believe that lotriflocane A and asboflocane A are the best materials, considering the fact that their dK over T are the highest. Let's get into the electrical aspects of our project. So in IOP sensing, there are 2 main mechanisms. One's a passive circuitry and the other one is active circuitry. Now most inductive and capacitive circuits use passive circuitry. Now this is great because technically we're getting resonance frequency, and then the phase shift associated with the differences in resonance frequency can actually be correlated back to a capacitive value, which can then be correlated back to a pressure. Nevertheless, the problem with this is there's no way to store the data, and that's the biggest problem that we notice. We need to be able to store the data. Otherwise, the patient's going to have to use an apparatus every single 5 minutes or so. This is why an ASIC would be the best option. An ASIC, although it is really complex in nature, does allow for low power management capabilities. In addition, it allows for readings of voltage or currents, which can then be packaged up in numbers and then sent through a transceiver and saved in a micro SD card, in which the over a 72-hour interval, the clinician will be able to extract the SD card and read the data on a computer. So this is a really ideal option for us because most of everything that we want in our system can be incorporated. In addition, we kind of wanted to look into where we're going to place our sensors. And as we can see right here, by a ComSol simulation done back in 2017, we can see that at the pretty much the annular region of our cornea, we see the highest strain. Now this is really optimal for us because since we're planning to use graphene, which in itself is really, really sensitive in nature because most resistive sensors are made of platinum. And the comparison between the sensitivity of platinum to that of graphene is graphene's over 10 times, has 10 times the sensitivity, which is amazing for applications because that means the smallest deformations in our cornea can lead to the highest changes in sensitivity, which would pretty much nullify the need for any kind of amplification. So we're planning to keep our graphene sensors pretty much along the annular region, and also use an ASIC and read voltage or currents using a resistive strain gauge made of graphene. So now to our proposed design. Let's go through this flowchart really quickly. So a patient will come into the clinic on day 1. They will essentially get their transceiver synchronized. The transceiver is what's really communicating with the contact lens on a two readings every hour kind of basis. So they synchronize the duty cycle of the transceiver, and then in addition to that, we need to calibrate our contact lens after choosing the appropriate size. That can be done using a valid approach such as the Goldman tonometer. After we're really able to do that, the patient's good to go home. And over a 72-hour period, we're essentially getting 2 readings every hour. The ASIC, which is essentially getting values from 4 different resistors based on our design, it's essentially being sent back through this mechanism, either through backscattering or RF, to a nano SD card, and that's being stored. Now on day 4, the patient comes back in and the clinician collects the SD card and is able to essentially plug it into their software, which will convert the voltage pressures. Perfect for them. Now if the patient's done with reading, they can essentially dispose their contact lens, or if they have to get readings later on in the future, they can preserve it in saline. So here is our overall design. We have 4 resistors made of graphene located all 90 degrees apart. This one right here is going to be the superior, the inferior, the nasal, and the temporal. Now different regions can allow for different readings of IOP, and that's ideal for us. In addition to that, the way to communicate with our contact lens will be through some kind of coil located in a clip-on on our glasses or a frame like that. Our transceiver is attached to that as well. So that will pretty much communicate with their contact lens back and forth at an established frequency of about 13.56 megahertz, because most literature show that this frequency is actually the best in terms of biomedical applications. And again, here's another overall view of our contact lens. Now our future directions. We plan to essentially go ahead and collaborate with electrical engineers, materials scientists, as well as manufacturing experts to make this a reality and get this into the hands of patients as soon as possible. We're currently in partnership with professors at UT Southwestern as well as UT Dallas, and we plan to make this a real viable option. So we'd like to thank our PI, Dr. Cooner, Dr. Arcello, Dr. Quevedo, and for their dedication, support, and mentorship. And we also want to acknowledge our NEI grant. So for any questions, please contact Dr. Cooner. Thank you very much.